morning. Good morning. We gather in the darkness because we are so close to the solstice, so close to this shortest day of the year. This time when even in the day the sun is low on the horizon and you can feel the cold deepening around us. And we are right in the middle of the 8 days of Hanukkah, a week from Christmas, a little bit more from Kwanzaa and then New Year's. We are, at the same time that we are in the darkness, we are also surrounded by holidays of light. All of these days marking the darkness and the persistence of the light. So we make this day to honor the dark, to be in the dark, to remember the kernel of earthly experience in the hurry and hum and fluster of the holiday season. We are in the darkest days, and we know that the earth is turning back toward the light. This, our little home spinning in the starry vault of space. I invite you to settle into the dark and to remember that the light surrounds us. I invite you to speak the words of our covenant while I light our chalice. And in the darkness, you may not be able to read them on your order of service. And so say whichever words you can remember, which means that we may have one of those readings when the words come and go, and that's fine. Collectively, we will be able to say the words that bind our community together. Love
is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship, to respect the nurturing power within all of us. Thus do we covenant.
Our opening hymn is hymn 1059 in this hymnal, the future praise hymn. The choir will lead us in this song. Shames, sing it for us one time and then lead us in the hymn. This morning we have a story for you. It's a story about Hanukkah, and it's a story about courage and creativity, and it's a story about the dark, long nights of solstice time. And most of all, it's a story about a man named Herschel, who was wandering from town to town in the early winter. He was Jewish, and he knew that Hanukkah was about to start, and he was coming to a town, and he was hoping to get to celebrate Hanukkah with them. But when he arrived, he discovered that they were not celebrating Hanukkah because they had a little problem with some goblins. And so Herschel decided to help out the people of the town, and this is the story of how that went. But let me tell you 3 things before we begin. One is that traditionally the menorah is lighted in the window of your house. That's an important part of the story. Listen for it, and you'll find out why. And this is just a passing comment, but if you don't know who Queen Esther is in this story, you may be wondering, who is Queen Esther? Well, the story keeps going. So you don't pause too long on Queen Esther. I want you to know that she is a character in the Jewish stories. She was smart and strong and charming, and so she saved her people once. Her name comes up, so I wanted you to know who she is. At the end of our story, I will walk down the aisle with a candle, and if you have a little candle in your hand, light it as I come by you with my candle. And with that, let us hear this story about living in dark times, the story of Herschel and the goblins. It was the first night of Hanukkah. Herschel of Ostropol was walking down the road. He was tired and hungry. Nonetheless, his step was light. Soon he would reach the next village where bright candles, merry songs, and platters piled high with tasty potato latkes awaited him. But when he arrived, the village was silent and dark. Not a single Hanukkah candle could be seen. "Isn't tonight the first night of Hanukkah?" Herschel asked the villagers. "We don't have Hanukkah, Herschel," one of them answered sadly. "No Hanukkah? How could that be?" "It's because of the goblins. They haunt the old synagogue at the top of the hill, and they hate Hanukkah. Whenever we try to light a menorah, the goblins blow out the candles. They break our dreidels. They throw our potato latkes on the floor. Those wicked goblins make our lives miserable all year long, but on Hanukkah it's really bad." Herschel knew he must help the village people. "I'm not afraid of goblins," he said. "Tell me how to get rid of them." "It's not as easy as you think," the rabbi warned. "You must spend 8 nights in the old synagogue. The Hanukkah candles must be lit each night. On the 8th night, the king of the goblins must light them all himself. That is the only way to break their power." "Well, I'm not afraid, Rabbi," Herschel said. "If I can't outwit a few goblins, then my name isn't Herschel of Ostropol." The villagers wished Herschel good luck. They had no potato latkes to give to him, so they packed several hard-boiled eggs for him to eat, along with a big jar of pickles. The rabbi gave Herschel a brass menorah, a package of candles, and a box of matches. Then the villagers said goodbye, and nobody expected to see Herschel again. It was long past sundown by the time Herschel climbed to the top of the hill where the old synagogue stood. The crumbling building was gloomy and dark, and rusty hinges squealed as Herschel opened the door. Herschel shuddered. Well could he believe that goblins lived here. He put 2 candles in the menorah and set it on the windowsill. He struck a match and lit the Shamus candle. He said the blessings and was about to light the other candle when he heard a voice. "Hey, what are you doing?" Herschel turned around. Here was a goblin no bigger than a horsefly, with a long pointy tail and 2 little bat's wings hovering in the air. "I'm lighting the Hanukkah candles," Herschel said. "Tonight is the first night of Hanukkah." "Oh, no, it's not! We don't allow Hanukkah, not around here." "Is that so?" said Herschel. "Who's going to stop me, a little pipsqueak like you?" "I may be little, but I'm strong," said the goblin. "Really? Can you crush rocks in your hand?" asked Herschel. The goblin laughed. "Crush rocks? You're joking. Nobody's that strong." "Well, I am. Watch." Herschel took a hard-boiled egg from his pocket and squeezed it until the yolk and white ran through his fingers. "That's how hard I'm going to squeeze you if you try to stop me from lighting these candles." The little goblin's eyes opened wide, since in the dim light The egg looked exactly like a rock. The little goblin shook with fear. "You leave me alone," he squeaked. "Gladly," said Herschel, "if you let me light my candles in peace." "All right," said the goblin. "One night won't make a difference, but you better not be here tomorrow. Big, scary goblins are coming, much bigger than I. If they catch you lighting Hanukkah candles, you'll be sorry." "We'll see about that," Herschel said to himself, and he lit the first candle. On the second night, another goblin appeared. This one was big and fat and waddled like a goose. Herschel was finishing his dinner of pickles and hard-boiled eggs. "Have some pickles," he said to the goblin. "Pickles? Here, catch." Herschel tossed him a sour pickle. The goblin caught it in his mouth and swallowed it. Pickles are good." "Do you like them? I have plenty in this jar. Take all the pickles you want." The greedy goblin grabbed as many pickles as his claws could hold. But when he tried to pull his fist out of the jar, he couldn't. "I'm stuck!" the goblin shouted. "You put a spell on this jar and trapped my hand in it." "That's right," Herschel said, laughing. "And it's a very powerful spell. You came here tonight to stop me from lighting Hanukkah candles. So now I'm going to light them all while you stand with your hand in that jar and watch. How do you like that?" "No, no," screamed the goblin. "I hate Hanukkah." "Too bad. You'll have to get used to it." Herschel said the blessings and lit the candles slowly. Then he sang all his favorite Hanukkah songs. The goblin wailed and carried on so much that Herschel finally decided to let him go. "Shall I tell you how to break the spell?" Yes, I can't stand it anymore." "Let go of the pickles. Your greed is the only thing keeping your hand trapped in that jar." The goblin let go of the pickles. His hand slipped out of the jar easily. How that goblin raged! He had stood with his hand in a pickle jar while Herschel lit Hanukkah candles right under his nose. The furious goblin stamped his foot so hard that he shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. The wind blew them away. The third night came. Herschel felt something watching him as he set the candles in the menorah. Instead of lighting them, he began playing with the dreidel. An hour passed. Suddenly, Herschel looked up. Sitting across the table was another goblin. This one had a fiery red face and 2 enormous horns. "It's getting late," the goblin said. "When are you going to light the candles?" "Oh, later. There's plenty of time." Herschel spun his dreidel. "This is so much more fun." "What are you playing with?" the goblin asked. "It looks like a top." "It's a dreidel. Don't you know about dreidels?" "No." "Too bad. Dreidels are lots of fun. You can also make lots of money if you know how to play." "Really?" The goblin was interested now. All goblins like money. This goblin was no exception. "How do you play?" "It's very simple," Herschel said. "But you must have gold. That's the first rule." "I have plenty of gold. Is this enough?" The goblin poured a pile of gold coins onto the table. "That's fine," Herschel said. "Listen carefully now. This letter is Shin. If it comes up,
you give me a handful of gold. This letter is hay. If it comes up, you give me half your gold. This is Gimel. If the dreidel falls on this letter, you give me all your gold. Understand? Wait, there's one letter left. What about that one? That's Nun. If the dreidel falls on Nun, I don't give you anything. Ready? Let's play. You go first. The goblin spun the dreidel. The little top whirled round and round. When it fell, the letter on top was Shin. Too bad, Herschel said, taking a big handful of the goblin's gold. Try again, maybe you'll have better luck. The goblin spun the dreidel once more. This time, it fell on hay. This isn't your night, Herschel said, helping himself to half the goblin's gold. One more time, your luck is bound to improve. Once again, the goblin spun. This time, the dreidel landed on Gimel. Too bad, Herschel sighed as he took the rest of the goblin's gold. Would you like me to spin? Yes, the goblin grumbled. He was very unhappy about losing his money. Herschel spun the dreidel. This time, the letter Nun was on top. Oh my, I don't give you anything. I get to keep all the gold. Say, that was fun. Get some more gold and we'll play again. What about the Hanukkah candles? Oh, we'll light them later. There's plenty of time. Not for me, the goblin said. I'm leaving now. I don't like this game. I don't like Hanukkah, and I don't like you. Don't go, Herschel pleaded. I know lots of games. Stay a while. We'll have fun. Goodbye. The goblin spread his wings, swooped out the door, and flew off into the night. Candles, all by himself. On the following nights, other goblins came. One had 6 heads. One had 3 eyes. All were terrible and fierce. They growled and roared and changed themselves into horrible shapes. They tried to stop Herschel from lighting the Hanukkah candles, but Herschel fooled them all. Finally, the 7th night arrived. 8 tiny candles flickered on the windowsill. Herschel sat back to enjoy their light. Where were the goblins? Had they finally given up? Herschel felt very sleepy. His eyes closed. Suddenly, he sat up. He heard a horrible sound. A voice that sounded like the cracking of bones. Herschel of Astropol? Who is that? Who's there?
Don't you know who I am? Herschel, weren't you expecting the king of the goblins?
The voice rose to a hurricane roar. It ripped the shingles from the synagogue roof, and it shattered the windows. The Hanukkah candles reeled in the savage blast, but they did not go out. "You're too early!" Herschel shrieked. "You're not supposed to come until tomorrow." The great wind died down.
Don't worry, Herschel. I am far away, but I have the power to see you and speak to you. Enjoy this last
Hanukkah evening, my friend. Tomorrow night I will come for you. You fooled the other goblins. Let's see if you can fool me.
Poor Herschel, what was he to do? The king of the goblins was on his way, and no power on earth could stop him. Unless Herschel did have an idea. It was a big chance, but he had to take it. It was the only way to save himself and Hanukkah. It was the last night of Hanukkah. Herschel set the candles in the menorah. But instead of placing it on the windowsill, he put the menorah and the box of matches on a small table near the door. Then he sat down to wait. Night fell. It grew dark as pitch outside in the gloomy old synagogue. Outside, the world lay cold and silent. Suddenly, a great gust ripped the synagogue door from its hinges. The whole building shook. A fearsome voice spoke.
Herschel of Astropol?
Did I hear something?
It is I, the king of the goblins.
Herschel laughed. Don't be silly. You're just one of the boys from the village. You're just trying to scare me.
I am not a boy. I am the king of the goblins.
Oh, I'll believe that when I see it. Show yourself to me.
Behold, I stand before you. Do you believe me now?
Herschel tried not to look. Even in the darkness, he could see the outline of a monstrous shape filling the doorway. A figure too horrible to describe. He pretended not to care. It's too dark. I really can't see anything. A candlestick and some matches are by the doorway. Why don't you light a few candles? Then I'll see who you really are.
Indeed you shall.
A match flared. The shamus candle caught the flame. Herschel's blood turned into water at the awful sight before him, but he did not lose courage. It's still too dark. What are you afraid of? There are plenty of candles there. Why not just light them all? A hideous hand took the shamus candle and lit the others, one by one. Herschel felt himself growing faint, but he forced himself to look. His eyes grew wider and wider as each candle caught the flame. 6, 7, 8. The king of the goblins stood before him.
Now, Herschel, do you know who I am?
I know you're not Queen Esther.
Very funny. Enjoy the joke. It will be your last.
That's what you think. Be gone, or I'll take a stick to you.
How dare you speak to the king of the goblins that way?
I'll speak to you any way I please. You have no power. Your spell is broken. See? The menorah is lit. You thought those were ordinary candles you were lighting. They weren't. They were Hanukkah candles, and you lit them all by yourself. The king of the goblins roared with fury. The earth trembled, and a mighty wind arose. It ripped off the synagogue roof and blew down the walls. It splintered the great timbers and scattered them like matchsticks. Around the menorah, the whirlwind howled, but the candles never flickered. They burned with clear, steady flames. The king of the goblins had no power over them. The spirit of Hanukkah had triumphed. The great wind vanished as suddenly as it had risen. Herschel rubbed his eyes. The night was as still as before, even though the synagogue was gone. Walls, floor, roof, even the foundation stones had vanished. But the menorah remained, standing tall upon the little table where Herschel had placed it. Herschel waited until the last candle burned out. Then he started down the road that led to the village. "I'd better hurry," he thought. "I don't want to miss the last night of Hanukkah." But there was no reason to worry. In every window, there stood a menorah with 9 gleaming candles to light the way. The whole village was waiting for him.
Almost a prayer of hope, of longing for better times, of peace and simplicity. The words mean, in the year that will come, we will sit on the porch and count the migrating birds. The children on vacation will play between the house and the fields. You will see what good there will be in the year that will come.
scary things. And it is also full of stories and courage and songs. We take up an offering each week because it is part of our spiritual practice. It is part of how we remember to pass light around. We bring our golden coins and we give them to this place that holds the darkness and the light. And we use this time to notice the ways that all parts of our lives are connected. The dark and the light, the monetary and the spiritual, the practical and the ephemeral. As always, during this time, you are invited to light a candle in the window of your soul for the morning, for whatever needs light. There are 4 candle bowls along the front here, and I'll add one more bowl here on Herschel's table. During this time also, I invite you to write down joys and sorrows. If you need a little extra light in order to write things on our joys and sorrows card, I know that someone near you has a candle. They will loan you so that you can write. And you can find the cards in the hymnal rack along the center aisle here. The morning offering for all of the ways that this congregation defeats goblins will now be received.
Brings us another cheer. See the flame burn strong and clear. One candle lights the way. One hope, one dream, one world, one theme, one flame, one light. For peace throughout the night. One dawn of peace and light, sun shining from above, soar and rings just like a dove. One candle lights the way. Shining so true and bright, still our hearts fill with delight. For all the world's at peace tonight. Full of pure and brilliant sight, one candle lights the way. One candle lights the way.
there are any other written joys or sorrows that you would like me to read aloud, bring them forward so that I can read them with this handful of others. We sit in the darkness together and listen. Listen to the music, listen to the sounds of life around us, and listen to the quiet. Into that listening, I offer these joys and sorrows, knowing that the darkness and the quiet hold so much more. Rebecca has a joy she would like to share, that she saved up her money so that she could get a hamster. And her name is Ginny Skyler. Someone else went to see Star Wars with their mom and her friend yesterday. The Lucigian family wants to thank members of this church for their love and support while Lori's mom was dying. They appreciate the food and the notes, the visits, the phone calls from so many here. Nissa says, I am happy that this week my pod is doing a fundraiser for kids who care. Wendy Richards died yesterday at the Boulders at Riverwoods. She was surrounded by family members and friends. She was Rob Richards' aunt, who gave him great kindness during an especially dark time. That morning before hearing the news, Kelly, his wife, had a dream of her. They were together in a mysterious kitchen washing dishes, and glad for one another's company. My aunt loved my wife very much. Chris Chance writes a note of joy. Wonderful to be back with old friends here today. I've been busy with blending family joy in a new household in Durham, where Sasha has embraced 3 new sisters. And Holly says, my joy is being in the choir. Let us hold these joys and sorrows. We have heard the whole arc of life here, from the voice of a new person to the farewell of an elder and all of the things that happen in between. Let us take this moment and just breathe together for a minute. You might even put your hands on your belly or your ribs and feel that breath coming in like the summer solstice filling you, going out like the winter solstice emptying you. Let us breathe sun and dark together for a moment. We met a traveler named Herschel, who went right into the darkness. He went right into the darkest, scariest place he could find. And then he stayed there. Now, he stayed there to help out the villagers. But in stories like this one, you can always guess that there's something else going on. Maybe the synagogue is his own self, his own holy self. And he stays in that darkest part because he needs to face his own goblins. You know, those creatures that stomp around in your mind. And however you read the story, Herschel reminds us of one of the oldest spiritual truths that comes up in every tradition. The dark has wisdom too. Don't skip around it. We tend to tell the stories of our lives by the things we do, the work that happens in the daylight hours. And it turns out that what happens in the darkest hours is just as important. Winter solstice, summer solstice, the two poles of our lives that hold us, light and dark, growth and rest, inner life and reaching out. We must have both to be whole. Hanukkah, like many of the Jewish holidays, has rest and stillness built into it. The holiday of light in the darkest days of winter is full of family and friends and fried latkes and jelly donuts. And it turns out that the lighting of the menorah is a deeply grounded ritual. One of the pieces of that ritual is that the candles of the menorah cannot be used for anything besides glowing. They're not to be used for anything that might be work, not to be read by, not to roast a marshmallow, not even to light another candle. They are just there to give off light. They are the reminders that the lighters of these candles are remembering that the Jewish people fought off bullies to have their own place in the world, their own homeland and temples back. Present-day conflicts in the world, in Israel, mean that it is complicated to think about who is free and who is not. But behind the politics of the present, there is a deep spiritual truth, that it is good to rest, to be still. That we need to practice all the time, resting in the dark, resting at the edge of darkness and light. To let the dark be dark and the light be light. We are so often surrounded by urgency, the need to improve the world, to help people, to create holiday celebrations. And in the story, Herschel does a lot of work. He is wrestling with goblins. And in the midst of that work, he spends a lot of time not working. Sometimes playing with the dreidel, and sometimes just sitting in the dark, being still, watching a candle. Even at the end, the entire synagogue has blown down around him, sacrificed to the breaking of the spell, the destruction so that the light can come back. And he stands still and waits for the candles to finish giving off their light. Now, if I was Herschel, I would have gone running down that hill hollering, "Goblins, and I did it!" But he doesn't. He's still. Waits for the candles to burn down. And then he goes to join the others. Now, let me say, if you defeat the king of the goblins, you do whatever you want. Holler, lie down on the ground for a week, cry. You don't have to be quite as still. What I'm saying is that Hanukkah and solstice, parts of the Christmas story, they all remind us that yes, the dark is full of fears, and the darkness and the stillness have gifts that we cannot see at high noon. I invite you to sit in the stillness at the edge of light and dark, the place where the scene breaks out. choir will keep singing and sing through One Light, One Sun, one time for us, and then I invite you to join in it as well. If you would like the musical score, you can find it at the ends of your notes. Carry the light with you out into your day. Please join in the unison benediction. The words are printed in the order of service. Go in peace.
Speak truth. Give thanks bless each day. Respect the earth and all creatures, for they are alive like you. Care for your body, it is a wondrous gift. Be gentle with yourself. Live simply. Be of service. Be guided by your faith